Ag PhD full episodes and more are now available on Acres TV, the newest ag platform connecting you to fields of information. Look for us on watchacrestv.com.
During our Farm Basics time today, we're going to talk about row spacings.
All right, I had an interesting conversation with a high school student in the FFA in New York State, and she was saying, I don't understand why you guys are planting in such wide rows, 30 inches. We plant in 15-inch rows or 20-inch rows here. Why on earth would you plant in 30-inch rows? And it's pretty interesting as you think about, well, how come in some areas of the country their rows or the gap between the plants in their fields is wider and sometimes it's narrower? Well, it's got a lot to do with history. That's one of the things that I'd say on our farm.
So yeah, for us, we used to be in 38-inch rows about 35 years ago. And the reason why we were in 38-inch rows, on corn anyway, was so we could go through with the cultivator usually a couple of times, maybe even 3 times. So that's how we used to kill weeds. The problem was running through with the cultivator. Every time you went through, you released an inch of moisture, you lost an inch of moisture, and we can't afford to give that up. The other thing is we destroy our soil structure a little bit and tear up some roots. And it took some time and effort. So there was a lot of cost to that, and it really, in the end, hurt our yield. So that's why a lot of people have gone away from cultivating.
Well, and that's one of the reasons in our area we've gone away from those super wide rows.
Yep.
So 30-inch rows seem like, wow, this is pretty narrow spacing for us. The problem with switching from 38s to 30s is we had to switch equipment. We had to switch where the wheels were at. If you could just change things on your tractor so the wheels could move out or in, that's wonderful. But when you start switching up to something like a 15-inch row or a 20-inch row, you're going to have to switch to a narrow tire, and that could result in a lot of expense for your farm.
Well, not necessarily, because you could always have tram lines out there, so you could skip a row basically right where the tires are going to run, and there are a lot of people that do that, especially when you start talking about wheat and tram lines. But the other thing is, when you have these rows that start to get a little bit more narrow, well, now that means if I have a planter that's 60 feet wide, I need more row units because I'm putting more rows every 60 feet. So the planter gets a lot more expensive. The combine's going to get more expensive and things like that. So we started running the math. We're like, yeah, I don't like the price tag on this, but we made the switch anyway, and I'm glad we did. But yeah, if we were going to go down to 20s, well, now that's literally 50% more equipment we'd have to buy in that same amount of feet.
Well, another thing is the crop that you raise could definitely determine what you're going to have for a row spacing. I'll just give you the example of wheat. We already mentioned wheat. Well, if we're going to plant wheat, we might want it in a 7.5 or 10-inch wide spacing because wheat's not that big a plant, and we do want to shade in the row. We do want to catch all the sunlight that we can. If you put wheat in a 30-inch row, it's never going to fill that row in. In fact, we did a little demonstration at the Ag PhD Field Day last year just to show this. We put some wheat in at 30-inch rows, and people are like, what happened here? Why'd you do that? Well, it was a demonstration just to show you, hey, there's only so wide you can go if you're planting wheat.
One of the biggest reasons why a lot of people want to go back to slightly wider rows is more air moves through the row then, and there's usually a little bit less disease. So we find it both ways. Some people want to go a little wider, some people a little more narrow. We just today wanted to talk about a few of the things that we look at as farmers when it comes to picking row spacings.
Well, one thing we're always looking at as farmers is if we've got any weeds out in our fields. Can you identify this week's Weed of the Week?